Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your friendly neighbourhood weeb, the Eisenberg here. And sorry it took so long to put together this review for Stardust Crusaders. The reason it took so long is because it was split into two. The first part of them kind of understanding what they had to do, travelling towards Dio in Egypt. Now that took a long time because there was these other stand users. Now basically, if you don't know by now, stands are a physical manifestation of your fighting spirit. So basically it's like a spirit, if you will, that takes on like its influence from like obviously your will to fight. So from episode 1 of Stardust Crusaders Part 1, it basically laid the ground rules for everything to come. Because we had the mission statement that the guys here in the first panel, what they had to do. The mission statement is Grandpa Joseph, the guy with the brown Froda on his head, that you can see here in the middle and there on the left hand side of Jotaro. So, mission statement, Joseph's daughter, obviously she was introduced at the beginning, Holly. She was obviously a very doting mother, that she would do anything for Jotaro. But obviously Jotaro started off the series as your typical 17-year-old douchebag. Obviously that was the way it was written, because your stereotypical Japanese teenager of 17 years old, yeah, he doesn't look 17 years old. I know why he doesn't look 17 years old, is because the way they've drawn him. You might notice how like all the guys in this anime, before they relied on stands, were big and beefy, like strong men, like they like worked out a hell of a lot with like the 6-packs and the triple packs. Basically the anime equivalent of an old friend I have called Kyle Care. Now obviously there's no doubt that he'll be able to get this ripped, because obviously it's like kind of the same kind of workout kind of thing that he does, like they would probably do in this anime if they were real, but I don't know. But that was just an example. So basically they're travelling from Japan to Cairo the long way round, because they realise that if they travel in a certain way, Dio will know where they are. Because obviously they started off in a plane and they met like a disgusting stand user, and obviously they had to move from a plane to ground, and from ground to water, and then from water to ground again. So basically it was like plane, water, meaning like submarine, plane, boat. Was it plane? No, it was plane. They travelled in the plane to begin with, and then they moved to the what was it? They moved to a submarine, and then from a submarine to quite a lot of cars and that, and then they were on foot for a while, and then obviously near the end of the saga, if you will, they were in a car to get away from Dio, because he was chasing them in a car. But then they were back on foot again after a while. So it's like quite a lot of like transportation they were using, and then they always ended up back on foot. He's like, okay, fair enough. The series in part one, Stardust Crusaders, starts off slow, and then it starts to speed up. But I noticed as soon as they left Japan, they were travelling to where they were going, but it was starting to slow down, like a train. Hence why the end song for most of this is, well, the closing sequence, like the end credits. The first part was Walk Like an Egyptian, obviously because it was showing that they were going to Egypt to confront Dio to save Holly, because Holly, she had manifested her stand, but because she wasn't strong enough to cope with it, if you will. The stand that she had, I'm just going to call it Bella Forest. Now, her stand, Bella Forest, obviously it's probably not called that, because in the future, if someone's watching this video, the guy that draws and like does the story for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure will probably put a name on that stand that she had. But for the now, in 2019, November 2019 if you will, I shall call it Bella Forest. Now, Bella Forest is the stand that Holly has, but she can't control it because she's not strong enough to withstand the pressure on her. So it basically starts to kill her because it's so strong. So our boys here decide to head to Egypt, like I said before, to confront Dio. And obviously because if they manage to defeat Dio, then his control over Holly will finish and she'll be fine. Now, I'm going to omit, meaning not put in the result of what happens to Holly. You'll need to watch the whole series of the Stardust Crusaders to find out what happens to Holly. I'm not going to say what happens to her because it'll spoil it for you. But I will say they managed to defeat Dio right at the very end. And it basically shows growth in Jotaro from a douchebag teenager to a competent young man that is able to basically, how can I say it? He's basically able to strategize on the battlefield really, really well, because he understands that when Dio manages to overpower him, he realizes he has to. He has to make it look like he's dead, or go into a state where he's not breathing and his heart's not beating, because what happens is Dio, like some kind of animal, puts his ear to the ground to listen out for Jotaro's heartbeat so he can see if he's alive or not. So what Jotaro does is he gets his stand to temporarily stop his heart so that Dio doesn't know that he's still alive. But it's kind of funny though, because obviously Polnareff jumps in to basically stick the sword through Dio's head, hopefully trying to kill him. But he doesn't manage because Polnareff gets outsmarted by Dio, and Dio says stupidly, between the lines, to Jotaro, is probably listening off screen, how to beat him, because he's saying that if Polnareff moved his sword a little bit to the left or the right, he could have basically done something to his brain that would spend the end, would kind of spell the end for Dio. But all I'm thinking is, because him saying that and Jotaro off screen could hear him, that was Dio's downfall. Because there was a funny moment where Jotaro moved his hand a little bit, and Dio absolutely freaked out because he was like, he jumped from where he was to on top of a little sign that was in the area they were. Basically like a cat on a hot tin roof. Because he went choo when he jumped straight on like that, and he was like ready because he was like, well, wait a minute, Jotaro's not dead. But long story short, it got to the point where Jotaro was able to give Dio this most satisfying punch in the head. And from the angle that the punch was, it went right through his skull into part of his brain. I'm thinking it was part of his brain because Dio then couldn't walk because Jotaro had punched him in the head so violently at that point in the heat that he couldn't move. But then again, obviously, Dio being immortal, he was able to heal himself, obviously. But it's never truly stated how Jotaro could obviously just automatically use the same power as Dio's got. But what I'm thinking is, from watching it, Jotaro did say that Star Platinum is the same kind of stand as the world. So if they're the kind of same stand but with different looks and different powers, but at the core they're the same near enough stand, then obviously a condition was met in the fight between Jotaro and Dio that Jotaro only needed his stand to see the world's power being used so many times, so that in in a state of repeating itself, Jotaro's stand learned the power that the world obviously had to stop time, and then obviously Jotaro turned it around on Dio and basically messed him up quite badly. And obviously that was the end of Dio, and it was just one well placed punch that was able to defeat him, which was quite sweet. Now obviously at the end this was quite nice. They said their goodbyes, and in the game Eyes of Heaven, this scene still happens, but Dio doesn't die in the game version of this scene. He ascends to heaven, so he becomes Dio, the world over heaven. I think that's the name of his new stand. But he's able to kind of ascend into heaven and become a god, if you will. Your standard stuff, kind of like Zamasu from Dragon Ball Super, but a little bit different. Obviously this is the original timeline in the anime where they obviously separate ways, and obviously Polnareff is going off towards part 5 where he meets the new cast of characters, and Jotaro and Joseph are away back to their home to see if Holly survived. So obviously that's obviously the plan, going back to see if Holly survived. And obviously you find out before this scene of the plane flying back what happens to Holly. But I'll leave that obviously for you guys to see what happens to Holly. But if you've already seen it, then it's fine. This last bit doesn't make sense if you've already seen it. But anyway, Stardust Crusaders, fantastic. It slowed down to begin with in the middle, and I'm like, oh my god. But then as it got towards Dio, it started to speed up like really fast. Because within about an hour to an hour 45 minutes, it was the fight with Dio, the final fight, and then done and dusted. And I'm like, fast at the beginning, slow in the middle for quite a few episodes, and then obviously at the end, voomph, and then it's done. It's like, oh, fair enough. I will say one last thing though. Stardust Crusaders knows how to make you cry, and then when it's got you, when it's grabbed on your heartstrings, it completely rips those heartstrings to pieces, because the way it deals with death in this, it literally punches you in the face with the feels. Yeah, yeah. Even thinking about the death in this anime is like, Jesus, don't go there. Because it does, it literally goes through your feels like that. And it's like, oh jeez. It hits you like a ton of bricks, or a road roller. But anyway, hopefully you guys have liked my review of Stardust Crusaders. It'll be a while now until I review Diamond is Unbreakable, because I'm thinking Diamond is Unbreakable is as long as Stardust Crusaders. So, ladies and gentlemen, the review for not Stardust Crusaders. Aye, wait a minute. So the review is now finished for Stardust Crusaders, because obviously the end screen that I'm showing you now. The review for Diamond is Unbreakable will be next year at some point. Middle of January, beginning middle of February next year. Aye. Because I'll be working on other videos. And then hopefully by the middle of next year I get into part 5, finally. But by then I'll probably have part 6 ready.